So my learners are, this is for a B1 class, and my learners are mainly L1 Catalan and Spanish, and they find elision really difficult, so I thought I'd focus on that for this class. The reason I've done that is, as I say, they find it very difficult, and I decided to have as my objectives for the receptive stage. By the end of this stage, students will be able to identify examples of where elision takes place. The productive, the students will be able to produce examples of where elision takes place in the following. So I've made, it's a bit difficult to see, but I made some sheets of paper with script and phonemic script on it, and I would first of all, I've colour coded this so that they could see the elision in, well, so that they can try and discover the elision in red. So through a discovery activity, I would see if they could understand possibly why it was in red and why the rule may be the way it is. So we would discover that in pairs, and then a feedback session. That would be the first part of the staging for the receptive task. The next part of the task would be, they would have their T's on the table so that they were focusing on this words ending in T. And I would tell them it's a dilemmas class. More about the dilemma later. The next part would be that the receptive task would be, I would read these sentences out again, exactly the same ones, and they would have a blue fly swat, and when they heard the elision during the when I was speaking the sentences, they would hold it up and wave it in the air, and when they didn't, they wouldn't hold it up. So I'd be able to test whether they're actually hearing the elision or not. So that would be the first part, so I could support them and go through any difficulties and scaffold to the next task. So the next task would be that would be the productive task, and this would be where I would use a middle chain. It's not really a front chain, it's not a back chain, so I called it a middle chain. So it would go something like this: about talking, thought about talking, have you thought about have you thought about talking, have you thought about talking it through with her, have you thought about talking it through with her. And for a strong class, I might say the last sentence a bit faster and then slower and then normal speed, or I may keep it at normal speed for a weaker class. So that was my choral drilling that they would do all together. I think I've done that because it would support them, and I wouldn't want to ask them to do this individually because I think this is a really difficult task, and I like the support, and students really like drilling, but when other people are involved, and if they feel silly, they can, other people feel silly, everyone joins in together, and I found choral drilling very successful, and that's the rationale behind that. And the middle chain, if you separate some of these words out too much, you end up without any elision, therefore you're not actually testing the elision anymore. So the next part is telling them the dilemma. The dilemma is, I would read out, I've just found out that my friend's husband is cheating on her and she doesn't know. So I would then get the stems from the sentences we used at the beginning that I mentioned. So if you thought about, how about, etc. And I would get them to make up questions and ask me questions using those stems with the next part of the sentence, and that would test. So words that followed the T sound, that were consonant clusters, that they should be producing elision, and words which were vowel sounds would not necessarily produce elision. So I'd be testing that. So again, we're testing again another part of the production of that. The next part would be that they would invent their own dilemmas, and the students would get together, and one would say the dilemma and the other would they would ask each other questions. So one would produce a dilemma and the other would formulate some questions to ask, to give advice, sorry. and to ask about that. And then I would go around and monitor and support them, and then they would swap over. The rationale for this is that it would be personalised, and they would have their own personal situation, their own choices. It promotes learner autonomy and personalisation, and also it allows them to have their own STEM example sentences for target pronunciation, which hopefully will make it more memorable.